Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning. Sorry if I sound tired today. My wife has been sick. Well, not just my wife and daughter have been sick. So, starting to feel it a little bit myself. So, I will state that I don't really know why TSM's selling off because they had a very good earnings. So, I'm not sure if today's going to just get bought up entirely or if we're going to see continuation within that. It's just a little weird to see such a good earnings have such a poor reaction. Now, at first I thought it might just be because of, the overall Asian markets have been having to sell off a lot of equities, um, just because of having a lot of their rates being hiked and a lot of the macro conditions going on. But we got to the pre-market and we sold off even harder. So we'll have to see if this is just a ruse. I'm thinking it might be, but we'll check the gamma and everything once the market opens. Now, in the overnight last night, or after hours, no, the overnight, we did end up pushing to not all-time highs, but we did close a very important cup. So potentially this is just that handle on the cup right now, which if it is, that can kind of create the conditions like we saw yesterday where we end up catching that for a really big gain. But I want to be absolutely sure that's what we're dealing with before we try to, um, chase calls into this. I still have a couple calls, so if it is selling off, then that's what we're dealing with. Just doesn't make a lot of sense though. The one thing that does make sense is that on TSM, we were basically right at the lower Bollinger. Um, with the current price action, this actually pushes us into the lower Bollinger. Now, if we aren't going to see a rejection of that range, if we're going to see the market try to claim that lower Bollinger, then they're going to close below that level, which currently is at that 408.41. It'll be lower on open, so probably around that 406. So we would need to see it close below that level. Do I think TSM is going to sit at the low all day long? It's hard to say. Um, I mean, the earnings came in actually very, very, very impressive. Um, I'm surprised it's even red right now based off the earnings. The earnings was the type of earnings where, a year and a half ago, we would have seen a company be up, 10, 15% overnight. Now, people might say the price action was priced in, but, seeing how this was the daily time frame, can't really say that was priced in. We've been technically selling for almost a week now. Good morning. Yeah, TSM, I'm really trying to think about potentially buying into TSM at this point because the earnings were just super, super impressive. I mean, they absolutely killed it on their earnings. So it's very surprising that we're even seeing the type of reaction we're seeing right now. Sorry if it sounds like I'm shivering. My room is absolutely freezing again. I do have a heater in my office, but it gets hot later in the afternoon, so it's like if I turn on the heater now, I get rid of all that cool that's, being saved for the afternoon. Let's see, IBM, so with IBM we do have this super important support at that 207.77 that we did talk about. Excuse me. Could potentially push to that 207.77. But I do think it'll start catching a bid fairly soon here. I'm interested to see what's going on with the HIG today because that'll tell a lot of what the actual story is. Good morning. So give me just a second because I want to look at everything really quick that's going on. And market opens in exactly a minute. ACN's flying in the pre-market, so that's good for the calls that I do have. Alright, so the HIG is at 79.75, which isn't great, but we'll see how that develops in a few minutes from here. The VVIX will update momentarily. Now let me go ahead and check our max pain for today. So 752. I just want to get these all in the same candle really quick so that I can align them when we get our data. So we did push a really important support right here, or resistance, closing a bit of a cup. So the max pain is at 752. Let's check our gamma levels, see if they updated yet. Okay, so our call wall is at 755. Put wall is at 752. Okay, so we have our max pain and put wall at the same spot, so for now I'm going to go ahead and just delete the max pain. If this does change later, we'll update that. So already this is the market telling us that the large likelihood is we will be trading between this range today. Now, with this pushing upward and closing that cup, this would make a lot of sense for them to pull down and build a handle, which that'd be below that put wall. That way they can get a ton of premium, especially if they are going to be buying up TSM, which so far they are. It's kind of what I expect. Again, the earnings were very good. Now, this is the conditions too short here because we do short the top of cups, but I'm not going to. Call and put wall both staying put right now. So I want to get this resistance marked out really quick. That's at the 422.77. And I want to check a couple levels really quick. So our daily or 5-day moving average is at the 752.57, which means that the upper bounds is at the 742.50, and then or not the 742, the 752, I can't talk, 754.50, excuse me. And then the lower bounds is at the 748.50. Okay. I can't talk. I'm just going to mark it out really quick. It's at the 750.50, excuse me. So again, we did close that cup, so if this is going to be a handle downward, we are looking for it to not push all the way to the 751.20. If it pushes all the way to the 751.20, then that's going to invalidate the cup that has been built this morning. So we will be watching for that. But potentially we're forming a very large inverse cup here. And IBM did hit that support we talked about at the 207. It's currently below that a little bit. The HIG has been buying upward, so it's currently at the high of the day at the 79.78. Volatility has pulled up on the open. Did have a high of the 94.02 and a low of the 92.58. Currently at 93.70. So it is elevated. Just going to be really patient on positions here. Again, we did talk about shorting up there. I just, excuse me, I just did not take the position. So I'm holding my call still from yesterday, which I'm completely fine with holding. I do think that today's going to be bought up, but we'll see. It'll be based a lot around this 751.20 if we actually push down to that range. But we are below the put wall, and because we are below the put wall, that means the dealers might be trying to sell some high IV puts here. Also, potentially we are creating a smaller inverse head and shoulders here as well. So if we end up finding support here, that'd be very bullish. But it's definitely way too soon to say just yet. Now, semis did pull to the 743.38, currently at the, not 7, the 542, 543.38. I can't talk today. Currently at the 540.50, so. As you can tell, I didn't sleep very well. So I'm gonna be fumbling numbers all day long, but hopefully you'll understand what I'm saying. Alright, so we did hit that 720, which invalidates the cup. Does create that inverse cup, so we can expect to pull upward and potentially head downward further. I'm not going to say that fully yet though, because again we are below the put wall currently, which does kind of create the conditions where we can start to see some heavy buying, later on today. HIG is still sitting at the 79.77, which overall is holding its ground. Volatility still a little elevated at the 94.43. This is potentially starting to become that range to take calls in, just out of the mean reversion. But I don't want to take calls too early, if we're going to, continue seeing the market selling off. Good morning, everybody. So we're just waiting to see overall, mainly right now I want to see what the Higg wants to do. Because currently the Higg's telling us that everything's okay. Yes, it might be red, but so far it's not really selling off. So volatility at the 94.33 did hit a high of 94.44, so we still have some room to pull down if we're going to, see the volatility pull downward. Higgs starting to buy up a little bit. Looks like our ACN is finally going to hit that 140 range. So I'm going to put a random high price on my 140 call, see if it hits later. Semi is still struggling a bit, but we do have this very important support range. At the 532, so we might end up aiming to tag that level, then build some support off of that. Then I want to look at TSM. We do have this very important support there, which is at the 404.58. So we're very close to many different support ranges here. So the main reason why I think TSM's ending up selling off, even though we had a, very, very, very good earnings, is that they did increase their spending budget by multiple billions. And because of that, maybe that's shaking investors a little bit. I don't know why that would shake investors, because that increased spending is basically to allow them to, um, you know, create more chips and everything. Their orders are backlogged, by all the top companies right now, and they're not seeing a slowdown in that whatsoever. So that increased spending is just helping opening their Arizona plant, helping opening some of these new facilities that they're trying to get it, up and going. So I think that might be the reason why they're selling off, even though the overall earnings were really, really good. Now, one thing I do want to look at is that if we are selling off today, and let me hide some of the drawings. I mean, obviously we're selling right now, but if we're going to continue this sell-off, okay, um, we have the 10-day moving average at the 750.25, which is a fairly strong support. Um, we have the 20-day moving average at the 744.83. Now, again, usually we test the 20-day moving average roughly every 20 sessions. We tested that, I'm not going to count it, but I want to say about 7 sessions ago, so we still have about 13 sessions before we need to test that level. 10-day moving average, very close to that 7-day range within, the last test, so we might be trying to test that level as well. But we are going to be patient here. The HIG is at 79.77, so even with all this selling that was happening underneath this put wall, the HIG is still telling us that the market's okay and very likely should be buying upward. Now, I'm not going to chase any calls or anything right now until I see something, pretty strong open up. I do have some calls for tomorrow, so I'm not too worried. If we are going to buy the upside, then I'll catch that upside with those calls. Volatility has started to pull down a little bit. Again, it was at the 94.44, currently at the 94. I'll look at the 1-minute time frame here. Closed a small cup, but again, we did create that very large inverse cup, and because of that, this could be a handle for that inverse cup. So we need to be cautious of that. Overall, I do expect today to be bought up. HIG is at the 79.78. And TSM has been slowly trying to buy its way back up. So if we do pull up towards the 714, I want to say 7 because that's what we've been focused on for the SPY. The 414.49, if we close that small cup there, then that would be a cup and handle to help buy some of this sold off weight. Back above the put wall. So today's the type of day where I'm just gonna call out all the good trades and not take them myself. We did call out the put. That would have done really good. And we called the call buying area. So far that's doing okay. Volatility still pulling down, so the 93.72. So again, this can potentially be that handle for the larger inverse cup. Just something we have to be prepared for. A little too soon to say whether that's going to be that or not. Semis did pull down to the 532.68, currently at the 535. Our HIG has been slowly increasing, so it's at the 79.78. Let me look at NLR. Ooh, uranium and nuclear. So, I have a really love-hate relationship with nuclear companies, because I think they're absolutely fantastic. However, usually any form of nuclear energy takes about 7 to 13 years to start seeing a profit. And that's after you build the facility, after you get through all the, you know, red tape that you have to get through with nuclear projects. So it's hard to be bullish on anything with nuclear energy when those are kind of the conditions you have to watch out for. Now I know that's tracking a little bit of uranium prices itself, but that kind of goes back to what we've been seeing with precious metals overall, which is that, yes, we've been seeing the treasury yields fall a little bit. We've been seeing a lot of the hawkishness starting to pull back from, you know, sitting in those expectations of wanting to have rate hikes to potentially now being a position where the Fed might start just focusing on purely pausing, which is very good for precious metals. However, the Iran conflict is very, very bad news for precious metals. Precious metals were absolutely rallying until we entered that conflict. So that, with the nuclear side of it, being that nuclear investments take a very, very long time to see fruition, it makes it very hard to want to jump into any form of nuclear slash uranium type play. So I can't really recommend it, even if the technicals might support it. Yeah, you're very welcome. Now the Higg is at the 79.77. So again, it's still holding very, very strong here. Okay, which is, exactly what you want to see if you're bullish on the market. Again, I have not taken any positions today yet. I'm just being very patient right now. But if we continue to see the Higg holding today, and if we don't push this support range, then I will be adding to some of those 755 calls for tomorrow. But I do want to see this range taken out of TSM though, the 414.49. Now the entire market doesn't revolve around TSM, but it's going to hold a major weight in what's going on today. Volatility is at the 93.61, so that has been pulling down. Starting to potentially see some bullish structure in here on the 1 minute time frame, which it isn't great bullish structure, but structure is structure. So if we do head back up to the 752.26, that would close a smaller cup, which we just did. And now we look for the next resistance range, which would be that 752.52. So that's our next level. And then after that, we would be pushing towards, the high of the day, which would be that 753.52. So looking for that level to be hit, create a small handle, push upward, create a small handle, push upward. Again, I do think it's kind of insane that we are having that selling in TSM. I went through their earnings report, word by word. Was up most of the night doing so. Um, they had an absolutely super, super good earnings. So it's kind of crazy that we saw it pull down -4% in the pre-market. The HIG is still buying upward. So currently 79.78. It was just at 79.79. So I'll probably pop back up there in a second here. Next resistance has been hit. Okay, that's good. That creates a cup. From that cup, we should expect a small handle into the next one, which would be the 753.52. So if we continue seeing the signals we're seeing today, that is heavily suggesting we're going to be buying to the upside. VVIX is at the 93.07. HIG is at the 79.79. So a lot of very great signals going on here. 79.80 now, so even better. TSM should close the smaller cup here at the 4, basically that 411.47 range, which does create a little bit of an inverse head and shoulders, which should be enough liquidity to push us back up to the 414.49. I think I said 711 something, but it's 411. I'm focused on the SPY price. Now I want to go ahead and check the gamma again, just to make sure we're not missing anything. Okay, so those are still the same. The call wall at 755, put wall at 752. So nothing has shifted there. So now we just wait. Volatility at the 92.94. HIG at the 79.79. So still plenty of great signals. I want to mark this out that I did call for puts there, just did not take them. What do you think of Netflix earning after market today? Oh geez, so Netflix, haven't checked that chart in a while. They basically did reject this massive cup that I was expecting. I'm gonna go to the weekly time frame. Looks a little grim. Now, I haven't checked their last few earnings. Um, it's a very small EPS estimate. I don't know. I'm just thinking about the company itself. I haven't checked their subscribers or anything, but I know that anytime I turn on Netflix, there's literally nothing to watch. Um, it seems like they haven't put anything new on there in like almost 6 to 8 months now. Um, which basically only means the only reason why I have it is because of some of the stuff my daughter watches. Um, so I'm just talking about my own personal situation with that. Doesn't really hold a lot of weight for the overall earnings, right? But I feel like a lot of people are very likely swapping to different providers in terms of their entertainment. Again, that's a lot of me just self-projecting, but um, I haven't seen almost anything new being added. They've added a few shows, a few movies, but it's not like the old Netflix where they were adding a ton of stuff, where it was super interesting to stay tuned into. Higgs still buying upwards, so at the 79.81. And our volatility is still pulling down, so 92.91. TSM did close that. Is this one we're looking at right here, the 411.44. And now very likely pushing towards that 414.49, which not only closes the cup, but we did talk about the liquidity for an inverse head and shoulders here. So that's looking good. That's a very good signal. And with that, this actually creates, gonna have to draw this wonky because of this large candle down, I apologize. But that creates this very large cup and handle, okay? Which is, very likely going to try to take us back to that 422.77. We don't usually create these type of candles just willy-nilly. Usually we try to reclaim those type of ranges. So I do kind of expect that 422 to be reclaimed. And from there we can look at the 428. No, I don't think that's going to be hit today. But I do think they'll work on it. Again, today's earnings was really good. I think out of anything, it might have just spooked investors a little bit that they increased their facility spending. Um, but overall, it was still a very, very good earning. Even with the forward guidance is projecting, increased revenue and everything for next quarter. So it's kind of weird that it sold off. Yeah, you're very welcome. I know that Netflix um, information doesn't help a whole lot, but I just haven't been seeing the company doing that great. You know, it's been a while since we've been seeing Netflix doing great. Netflix used to be an absolute titan in the S&P, and I feel like they've fallen off quite a bit. You know, about 2 or 3 years ago, the market would move around Netflix's earnings. If they had a super good earnings, the market would rally. If they did poorly, the market would sell off. Now it's not so much the case. Now it's more the case of they can kind of do whatever and the market's still going to do its own thing. So very likely building a handle here on TSM. So with that call wall being at the 755, the expectation really should be that we'll be trading up towards that range or even above it. Kind of same situation here. Dealers really like trading outside of these call and put walls, um, but usually it's only momentarily. Sometimes they'll actually push above or below the level and close below those levels. It does happen, but it's more rare. But the whole goal is that you push below these levels, sell high IV contracts, both directions, and then you pull down and close somewhere in between. Kind of like yesterday. So my calls for tomorrow are only down 5% right now. The HIG is currently at the 79.81, so that's still good. Volatility did pull down to the 92.69, currently at the 92.72. So it has dropped a lot since this morning, but it's still a little elevated. Now with the top of this cup, this does create the conditions for puts again, but I'm not going to take them because I'm just way too tired today. Today's one of those days where I have my calls for tomorrow. I'm completely okay with just watching the price action. Yeah, they took a little premium. I'm not too worried though. Once we start heading back up towards that range again, and the market knows that that range is in reach, then the IV will jump back up. And there's a large interest up there. That's basically what those call wall and put walls are, is showing that there's a lot of orders in those ranges. So I wouldn't be too worried unless we see the HIG start selling off. The HIG has been telling us pretty much all morning that the market's strong, very likely going to be buying upward. I'll type it out. It's the HYG. So that's the corporate bonds. Um, the way that I like to think about corporate bonds is that you have your US Treasuries, which are basically a guaranteed investment. You know, if you go spend $1,000 on a US Treasury bond, whatever duration it is, you're going to get whatever percentage yield back that you're, buying into. Then you have the HIG, which is kind of underneath that. It's the corporate bonds, quote unquote junk bonds. Um, but those hold a yield that are less than the US Treasuries and or more than the US Treasuries, excuse me, but less than the overall equities, meaning actual shares. Okay, so dealers like to trade the HIG for very, very, very tight spreads and very small yields. Okay, so they have to be basically pricing in that type of market at perfection level, because every tiny little percentage matters. And the reason why that's important is because if we start seeing equities selling off, then that degrades from the corporate bonds, okay? Which means that they have to start selling the HYG off if that occurs. So it's an indicator that I like to watch because if that's holding strong, then that's telling us that very likely the market's going to be holding strong slash buying. If it starts selling, then very likely it's telling us that the market doesn't like the current levels it's at and that they're going to, push downward. So it's a very important indicator, even though it's an ETF. Very important indicator to watch. Now our VVIX is at the 92.69, so still pushing down. It was at the 92, looks like 92, 93 something for a moment there. So all of our bullish signals are looking pretty good so far. Now again, we do expect a little bit of selling here just to create a handle for this cup. HIG is reflecting that a little bit. It's at the 79.79, was all the way up at the 79.81. We should be seeing that jump back up to the 79.80 very soon here. Yeah, you're very welcome. It's a very, very useful tool, so I heavily suggest everybody who day trades the SPY to add that to their watch list. Yep, it's back at 79.80. There's some of that buying. TSM starting to create that handle on that cup. So we do want to see it push above the 414.80 to really signify that this handle is breaking out. Now I'm glad I did not get puts there because I ended up blowing the top off that cup. Doesn't mean that puts aren't going to start printing at that range still. But just really not interested in shorting into this type of market right now. Volatility still holding steady at that 92.67. You haven't checked the SPAX gamma today, but that would make a lot of sense. Now we are kind of expecting volatility to increase a little bit here. We are expecting the HIG to start selling a little bit here, just because we have created this cup. Should be expecting a handle downward. Yep, and volatility is starting to rise a little bit, so 92.84. And the HIG is at 79.78. So showing us that pull down a little bit. Now today's the type of day where I actually do expect it to close above this call wall. And the primary reason for that is the upper bounds of the 5 mod today is at that 754.54, if I remember exactly. So we basically had our range around that for the actual 5 mod itself, which means that we did test the lower bounds. We were in the center. Now we're testing the upper bounds. If we're going to close above the 5 mod today, then we should be pushing basically above that 755. The HIG is starting to see some pretty decent selling here, so just have to be cautious. But it's currently at the 79.77. Did pull down to the 79.76 at one point. And volatility is at the 92.88. The ADL looks really good on the day though so far. We have obviously, pulled down a little bit, but we haven't pulled down into a negative. We're still positive on our ADL, and we have been seeing a lot of that buying back upward. So even with this selling, we haven't been seeing, extremely strong selling at this point. And potentially with TSM being down so much earlier today, it does create that buying condition where if they pull it back to neutral, if they decide to buy up all of the selling today, that'd actually be extremely, extremely bullish for the overall market. Now the Hig is still acting a little weird right now, so just be cautious trying to push too much further to the upside right now. It's at the 79.76, and remember it was all the way up at the 79.81. Might seem like just a few cents downward, but every cent matters in the Hig. Volatility has picked up, pretty massively as well, back up to the 93.21. So even though we are pushing upward a little bit, we might be building towards a decent sell down. But I like what they're doing here. Um, I wouldn't mind if they buy all the way to the Sun 55. So if they want to blow the top off this cup, completely okay with me. Higgs starting to buy back up a little bit, so 79.78. Now I haven't checked, but I'm sure the calls are probably green now. And they are. They're up 16%. And TSM getting ready to push above that for 1480, which is extremely bullish. Again, if they pull to that 422.77, which is a really, really important candle to pay attention to, I think that pulled them green all the day, which for the overall market, that would be, very likely pushing us above that 755 range. Oh, I'm not going to be exiting these calls today, very likely. Um, I might exit a couple at that 756.22 if we push that range. But really kind of at this point, I'm looking for a pushback to all-time highs. Again, even though TSM did see some selling, their earnings report was almost immaculate, um, extremely, extremely strong earnings report. I think they had a 12% increase in revenue quarter over quarter, which is just, kind of bonkers, right? Um, Many other great things, they have orders just completely backlogged right now. They have so many different orders from all the top companies. I think it was just the facility spending that investors were kind of worried about. But to me, that's still a bullish thing that they're willing to invest more into working on their facilities and whatnot, because that means that they're going to start producing more chips. More chips means more profit. More profit, you know, equals good. So, kind of a silly sell-off to me, in my opinion. Volatility is pulling back down again, so 92.80. Higgs still sitting at the 79.78, which to me, the Hig is showing a little hesitation here. Um, which isn't the best signal, it's not the worst signal, but it is showing a little upside hesitation. Now with TSM pushing that for 1585, very likely aim to build a small cup from that. Basically continue this cup and handle structure. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. I would hold that SPY put for right now. Does it expire today? I'm assuming so. Well, actually, I don't know about that. Today might be one of these days where we end up just pushing against this upper Bollinger the entire session. And the primary reason why is because we did have a very adverse selling downside, which means that we have a lot of room to start heading upward. However, we do have some supports to grab onto here. We have this 754.60, and by support I mean resistance, but resistances usually do end up turning into supports. But with that, this will do a couple things. So one, this closes this very large cup. Okay. From that, very likely we will push above that 755 if we do hit that level at that 54.65. I don't know why I have it at 60. And the primary reason for that is because that's currently where the call wall is. So very likely they want to sell some very high IV calls in here, plus shake out a lot of these earlier calls. So very likely that's the type of range we'll look for a really quality short, because from that, very likely pull back down, retest into the daily 5 mile range, and then from there start really heading upward. But potentially we could just sit here and buy all the way to the 756.22. I think both of those are very, very reasonable. So I would try to give it that opportunity um, to pull down and form that cup, basically, or said that in the wrong order, but form that cup and then pull down to create that handle. Yeah, I know ACN is being dumb again. The Hig is still showing hesitation as well. It's at the 79.77. Now, I actually want to look at the gamma again to see if there's been any shift. Because ideally I would like to see the gamma wall move upward. You got the 79.76. Volatility at the 92.71. Now, I do need to check today's data because I do think we had some inflation data. So let's see here. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. The Philadelphia Fed Manufacturing Index came in at 41.4 when the previous was 10.3. Core retail sales month over month negative. Retail sales came in super cool. Kind of interesting to see the Philadelphia Fed Manufacturing Index rise that much. We're almost at the January 2025 level. So almost the highest reading in almost a year. However, all the other data came in bad, so. Now, one thing we can be seeing with the Hig is because it does have that attachment to the US Treasury yields a little bit. I know it's not related to them, but they do like to hold a spread together. Okay, so if we are seeing the US Treasuries pulled downward quite heavily, then we can also be seeing the Hig taking a little bit of a hit, even if our equities are going to be bullish. So a little bit of a mixed signal there, but it's still something we need to be very concerned about. Actually, I want to look at the Treasury yields right now. So the US 10-year is up today. Did rise a bit with the data. It looks like a flat line, but all these little percentages matter. Has to be the has to be that Philadelphia report. So wherever we head down to with this downside, that's where you're gonna exit your put, okay? Now, ideally, we should push down to the 5 mile or the 20 mile on the 5-minute time frame. And that's going to be at that 752.84. Okay, so 100% make sure you take that range. Did we push up to that level? Did not. We were off of it by 13 cents, which does matter. That's good, Mike. That's good. Yeah, if you're able to identify the contracts not doing well very early on, then taking those small losses, yeah, it's not the best, but not the worst either. Volatility at the 92.87 and the HIG is at the 79.75. Almost at the low of the day. The low of the day was 79.73. So this is starting to become very, very concerning for me. Again, it could be because we're seeing the treasury yields rise a little bit. Actually, I want to look at when that data set came out. So that came out 40 minutes ago. But it's really been just falling within the last 20 minutes. Now, one thing to remember, and I know I talked about it earlier, but the daily or the 5-day moving average is currently at that 752.50-ish. Might be above that now, but it was at that 752.50 range, which means that the upper bounds was at that 754.50 something. Okay. If the market really wants to break out from that daily 5-mile level, which we've been at for 2 or 3 sessions now, then we are going to see a push, well above the 755 range. So that's why I'm kind of bullish today, even though we did have that major sell-off with TSM. I still kind of have the expectations that they're going to buy up the majority of this sold-off weight today. Now, my real expectations at this point for like the next 30 minutes to an hour should be pushing towards that 754, 65, probably slightly above that, uh, maybe even pulling above that call wall, and then pulling down towards the daily 5 mile again. But it basically should be just a standard cup and handle type day. Especially now that we have been, um, buying up a large majority of the day so far. Dealers will want to shake people out of those calls. Now, the thing about selling calls and selling puts, dealers are much more inclined to have calls be exercised than puts be exercised. Um, because generally when they're selling calls, they're also buying shares at the exact same moment that they sell those calls. So for them, it's not really that big of a net negative in terms of closing above the call wall. I look at it a little differently. With a lot of red, to me that means that yes, we're seeing selling in that moment, but that also creates a lot of conditions to have mean reversions. Um, mean reversions are the primary way I trade. So it's kind of like the more red everything is, the more bullish I get. The more green everything is, the more bearish I get. So seeing very big reds this morning was, kind of very bullish for me today. Just unfortunately, I didn't sleep a lot, so it's not a quality day for me to be taking contracts on the 0DT. Or else I totally would have. There's been some great opportunities in here. Now, I do want to see the HIG start buying upward because, again, it's still at the 79.76. To me, that's showing a lot of hesitation, especially when it's looking like we're trying to have some form of breakout here. I would be expecting the HIG to be pulling back upward. My real expectation is we should be pushing basically into that level um, prior to the major sell down. Could be wrong, they might end up trying to sell below that. But I do think with all these calls here, they really want to, you know, basically milk people as much as they can. Um, sell as many of these super, super high IV calls as possible, then sell downward, get a lot of these people to get shaken out of their positions. We have a huge accumulation zone, basically right in this range. Which tells me that very likely they try to target that range to the downside. So, expectation, pull up. They sell a ton of contracts in there. Then pull down towards that range. Shake the majority out of their contracts. And then head back upward. So I'll keep these super thin so it doesn't block the screen. I want to look at the 1 minute time frame though. So if we pull down to the 753.76, then that will invalidate this smaller potential cup, create a little bit of a double top here. Then we have a really nice left shoulder built there, which potentially means that we could form that right shoulder. So we did invalidate that bullish cup. So very likely try to form a right shoulder in here and then push downward further. Now I want to look at QQQ because out of anybody, tech has been getting hammered. So that's looking okay so far. A little bit of a head and shoulders building there. So we're not out of the woods yet. And we did hit the support. Very, very close. It's looking like it wants to pull back down into that range. So we'll see if that happens. Again, the low of today on semis was at that 532.68. Currently they're at the 535.40. It did pull all the way up to the 540, or excuse me, the 535. Excuse me. The high of the day though was the 545.55. So if we start to build support at this range and don't continue pulling back downward, then this can create bullish structure. A little too soon to say on that though. We see the ADL tapering to the downside a little bit. Volatility has been increasing quite a bit. It's currently at 93.81. Last time I checked it was at like 92.72, something like that. Now this is looking like it wants to take us to the 5-minute 20 mile, which is right at that 753.01. So if you did get in those earlier puts, I would really try to take that range. I'm not sure if we'll push under that today. We might, but not entirely sure we will. Also, today's stream probably won't be too long. Um, I'm starting to feel pretty bad from my family's flu that they got or whatever. My daughter is young and she's in school, so she brings home colds all the time, and I have the immune system of a paper bag, so anytime they get sick, I get it worse. ACN has been everywhere today. Would have actually been some good trade opportunities in here. But I just don't like the price action right now. It's been constantly giving us issues. So once I'm out of those short-term contracts, I'll be happy. I do still have the September 150 calls going, which those should be fine. I'm not worried about those right now. I really should have bought some super long-term TSM contracts today. But I missed that, unfortunately. I'm gonna write that down because I've never heard of that. So let me see. HY. Thymosin? Thymosin alpha. I appreciate that because again, my immune system is just absolutely terrible. So volatility, let's see. Did pull back up to that 94.03, currently at the 93.89. So still elevated, even though we did see some buying back to the upside again. I really do expect this 5-minute 20 mile to be hit though. I think that's very well within our expectations. And that's also within our accumulation area too. I know it's kind of hard to see, but you see how there's this upside in the money volume and then there's this slight downside. That means dealers are trying to accumulate positions in that range. Okay. Um, which kind of tells me that very likely they're trying to push back to this range eventually. Whether it's just temporary or, using it for further liquidity to the upside. the HIG is at 79.77, so it did pull down all the way to the 79.75. And from that 79.75, it was sitting at that 79.76 for probably about 20 something minutes, which showed a ton of market hesitation. Now again, even with this buying to the upside here, this absolutely could be that cup and handle forming. Now we did not fully close this cup, so I don't really consider this a fully closed cup, but it's only 8 cents off. Okay. 8 cents off for the SPY. Is it the biggest deal in the world? Not entirely. The structure's still there. It'd be different if this was something like the HIG being, 8 cents off. That'd be massive at that point. But for the SPY, really not so much. But one thing that could happen is that this could just be, sorry, my hand dragged on my mouse pad when I try to draw that. This could just be working to close that cup. Okay, trying to build that liquidity to do so. Which again, this would kind of be that same thesis at that point. Look for the cup to close, potentially push above that call wall. Then from that range, that'd be a really, really, really solid short opportunity. From that short opportunity, push down towards some of these accumulation areas, and very likely start heading up today. Volatility still at the 93.93. And I'm just going to keep this area marked right here because I think it's important. So 2 trades would have worked out really well today. The third one that I suggested, which was right in there, so far would not have worked out. Okay. But I want to mark these green because I am happy about them. And they would have turned out to be very, very good trades. I have IBM calls going. I have IBM calls, IBM shares, and IBX shares. So I got a lot of IBM stuff going. For me, I really like buying companies when they have massive drops. Volatility is at the 94.07. HIG is back at that 79.76 range. Now the 5-minute 20 MA has pulled up slightly, so the original exit I was recommending was at that 753.01. Might have been at 753.03, something like that. But currently it's at 753.12. So if we do pull down and hit that range, again, I still heavily suggest trying to clear those puts out. It should be the candle down for that. So if you do have those puts, I would heavily suggest using this candle, assuming we do push down towards the 20 mile range. I want to look at TSM here. So you see the ADL on TSM is very shaky right now. We did have a big push upward, massive push downward, massive push upward, and now it's slowly pulling back downward again, but it's pulling downward a lot. So we'll see where that goes. Now I am seeing bearish structure in here, very likely on the 1 minute time frame. Yep, we do have, again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I removed the drawings because it drove me crazy. We talked about that double top, and with this double top creating this head and shoulders. So I would most definitely try to use that range to close your puts. Still at the 753.12. Even if we push a little bit below that, I would still try to take that range, because there's also a large potential that we bounce right off that range as well. I really don't have a ton of conviction in puts today, so awesome. That's great to hear. Yeah, I would definitely try to use this range to exit some of those puts. Maybe keep a runner just in case we push downward further, but I'm heavily cautioning against that. Today just does not seem like one of those major selling days. I could be totally wrong. Um, you know, the market's been willing to prove me wrong many times before. But just based off what I'm seeing, um, it just does not seem like a good idea to hold those for, trying to go for the low of the day or something like that. So hopefully everybody heeded my word there. Again, I'm willing to be wrong. But I think it's just sketchy at best. Now volatility is at 94.60, which is basically the high of the day. However, our HIG is still holding okay. It's at the 79.76. It's nice to see IBM green for once. Yeah, there's that 20 mile hit and potentially a huge bounce off of it. It's actually funny that it hit that accumulation zone almost to the penny that I drew out earlier. Yeah, literally to the penny. Whatever. So I'm very likely only going to be streaming like another 20 minutes just because I'm starting to feel worse and worse by the minute. So if anyone has any questions over the next, 19, 20 minutes, feel free to ask and I'll be more than happy to get into it. Now the HIG did pull back up to the 79.77 for a moment, currently at the 79.76, but I do think that's going to end up buying back upward pretty soon here. Volatility is slowly dropping, not anything significant just yet, but it was at the 70, or excuse me, the 94.60, currently at the 94.45. There's the HIG back up to the 79.77, which is a lot of, decent signals. If we start seeing tapering in our volatility, we start seeing our corporate bonds buying upward. Those are all really nice signals that we want to see if we're, wanting that upside anyway, which I do. I think we will try to close above this call wall today. Very likely push that 756.22 pull down between the call wall and that range. But we'll see if I'm right or not. Oh, I just guess I just answered that question before looking at chat. Yes, I do think the 756 is absolutely possible today. One thing we have to think about, and again, I always try to bring up the dealer perspective, right? But really, that's who we're trading against when we're trading in the market. We're going against the dealer. But they already were able to sell a ton of, really, really high IV puts today. However, they haven't gotten to that with the calls yet. Now, they have been selling a lot of calls, but they haven't sold these super high IV calls yet, which I would think that they would try to attempt to do. So I am kind of expecting that range to be pushed today. Volatility did pop back up a little bit, so it's at the 94.57. So if that continues to rise, that's going to tell us that very likely we're going to try to push downward again. Which again, that would make a lot of sense, even though I'm absolutely not keen on the puts here today. But with all these calls being bought earlier today, it makes a lot of sense for them to shake a lot of those calls out. Okay, whether they pull down to this accumulation range, which that's where I originally targeted this accumulation range, that I do think they try to push down towards basically that 752.30 to really shake out as many of the calls as possible, and from that range, then head upward. But they might try to just bounce off this 20 mile as well. A little too soon to say. But I think that if they can shake out a majority of these calls here today before buying upward, then they're going to try to do so. I'll be right back in just a couple minutes, everybody. And I'm back. I swear the market always sells down when I have to AFK. But we are actually seeing bullishness out of the HIG here. Okay, the HIG is actually buying upward at this point. Volatility is rising though, at the high of the day, 94.77. But the HIG is also buying upward. So do we see volatility start dropping off soon and then see buying? I think that could be a pretty high potential. Yeah, the HIG is at 79.80 now. Portfolio just randomly jumped up a ton. I don't know what moved. Whatever, I'm not gonna complain. Volatility pulling back a little bit, but it's still pretty much near the high of the day so far, so not really anything remarkable just yet. Oh, it's ACN, that's what it is. That thing is on a tear right now all of a sudden. Such weird price action. Not with the SPY. SPY's been somewhat predictable today. But this thing has been just annoying. Kind of dislike this symbol even though I've been doing okay on it. And my IBX shares are finally back in the green. Still got a ways on my IBM, which is okay. I have a 219 average right now, but I really didn't want to commit a whole nother, you know, 20,000 to buying 100 more shares. Volatility still rising. It's at 94.94. So it is at the high of the day. We are seeing the HIG buying upward against this, which is a little odd. So the HIG is at 79.81. It's also just been a really huge share buy on the SPY for 126.5 thousand shares. Which perhaps that's what the HIG is looking at. But the HIG is getting ready to push up to 79.82. The ADL is starting to look really nice. Volatility is at the 95.07. So a little bit of conflicting signals going on. I do expect the volatility to be the one to pull back though, rather than the HIG and the overall market. If the SPY happens to reach the 755 through 756, would you take puts? I think that's super reasonable. If we push above this call wall, kind of the exact same situation. If we push below the put wall, calls below that range, puts above that range, because the very high likelihood is that these two ranges will try to push back into or push under or above those walls, under the call wall, above the put wall. So I think that's a very um, smart way to target some of these contracts, especially especially if we can see a little bit of confluence with different signals. For example, getting the lower Bollinger underneath that put wall was a super ideal call entry. I wish I took it. I just didn't feel good enough to click the buttons on my phone. You know, that sounds so lazy, but I feel horrible right now. Um, so if we get the same type of thing, if we get the price pushing above the upper Bollinger on the 5 minute time frame, above that call wall, that's going to give us multiple signals, especially if we start seeing the HIG pulling down at that point, if we start seeing volatility picking up. Um, Align all those signals together to really create that really strong position. And we are bouncing off of that accumulation range that I talked about, at least so far. Volatility is still very elevated, so this can absolutely pull back downward. But the HIG is at 79.82, which is telling us that the equity risk isn't really too present right now. I think aligning these mean reversion type trades with these different gamma walls is like top tier, absolutely top tier, to time really solid contracts. It just takes a while because, you know, you might be waiting the entire day just to push one of these levels. Um, but I think that's okay. You know, it's really okay to do so because it's like these calls today. Look at how strong of a position that was. You know, that was basically a whole $4 upside. Um, really ideal. You know, that's very good. Yesterday we had a very similar result. Forgot exactly where the call wall was, or where the put wall was. I think it was at the 752, if I remember correctly. So kind of the exact same scenario here where we started accumulating calls and we ran those calls all the way from that 750 all the way up to the 754 again. So today's kind of like a repeat of yesterday, and I think a lot of that has to do with that sell down in the TSM earnings, um, which still kind of blows my mind a bit because I still think those earnings were really good. Okay, so my ACN call that I have priced for 220, I'm gonna move that up to 240. Because I think it's a good day to be greedy. Volatility is starting to drop off, which is exactly what we're looking for. Hasn't dropped off super significantly just yet, but it has gone from that 95.03 or whatever it was back down to the 94.50. I think we closed a small cup here as well. We did, so this is very likely building a handle to push back upward to the upside. So I really hope everyone really listened to me when I told you guys to close those puts at that range. Because right now our equities are telling us um, you know, pretty much nothing but really positive uh, outlooks right now. You know, the HIG is basically buying to the high of the day. Slowly seeing volatility pull down. We need to see more work done there. TSM. We do have to have a little caution over because this most certainly is a not only a head and shoulders but an inverse cup. From that inverse cup, we can potentially get a handle to the downside. So I'm gonna mark this with blue right now just because not entirely set on that being a bearish structure, but I think it has a lot of potential to do so. Semis, we still have a lot of work to do as well. I need to turn off the Bollingers here for a second. So I know these boxes are ugly, but they do help really show the structure here. So absolutely a bearish structure. Okay, we haven't created bullish structure to break out of that yet either. So heavily concerning. Now with the SPY, we have started to break some of the structure a little bit. Not entirely, because we do have to pull back up to the 754.57 to really invalidate this massive inverse cup slash head and shoulders. But it's starting to look pretty good. Okay. This is starting to look a lot like a cup and handle. If we can get that push back up to that range, that'll invalidate all of that bearish structure. And from that, we will have the cup formed and the handle, which I know the handle looks exaggerated, but we don't judge handles around here. We also have this larger cup that's likely formed as well. I know for a fact we have one right at the, let me see the exact penny. It's basically at that 52. So, and with that, we can be closing this as a handle to push to the upside much further today. So, I think the bullish outlook is very strong. Volatility still pulling down a little bit as well, so 94.40. Again, it was at that 95.0 whatever. You're very welcome, Jennifer. Now, Johnny, let's see. I'm so frustrated at what just happened. I took the loss on my 16 755 calls, 4.36, and a minute later. Oh, I wish you told me you were in calls. I would have totally told you to keep those. So with the HIG being as strong as it is right now, um, this is telling you very likely the upside's coming. Okay. Um, yes, we've been seeing a little bit of a reaction out of volatility, but it hasn't been enough to completely shake some of the structure that we're building here. But I've made that mistake before. It happens to us all. Happens to the best. I've definitely had times where I've sold contracts and literally, and I'm saying like literally a second or two later, they'll be like double in price. It's the most frustrating thing. I laugh about it because I've been in that situation a few times, so even though it absolutely is not fun. Ah, sorry about that. It's okay, we'll find some more trades. Well, I am gonna be going here because my daughter is not feeling good. I'm not feeling good. My wife's not feeling good. Um, gotta take care of everybody. Um, but besides that, thank you all for watching today. If there is any final questions, I'll go ahead and take those. But if not, then I will be streaming tomorrow morning as well, and we'll find some really quality trades as well. So, not concerned about that. I hope it's been helping where we've been marking down where the call wall and put walls have been. Um, Makes it really easy when it's visual because you can kind of tell exactly when to take really good contracts or whatnot. Let's look at the 1 minute time frame here one last time. So this is still looking very bullish. Okay, unless we see a breakdown of this cup structure, basically this pulling down all the way to the bottom of that 5, or excuse me, the 752.98, then I wouldn't really worry. I would have fully assumed that we're going to push above that 755 today. Again, the only thing that's kind of shaky for me right now is semiconductors. Okay, we need to start seeing bullish structure. So I want to see a cup forming here up towards that basically 538, 539 range. I want to see that occur. I want to see a handle coming from that, closing this next range at the 541, seeing another handle from that, and then pushing back up towards the 545. Because we need to break this bearish structure to really have the breakout today. That's going to be really, really, really important. So, but our ADL's looking great. It's pulling above the high of this morning. I'm going to be holding my 755 call today unless we see some massive push to that 758, but I'm really assuming we're going to try to push that 758 very likely tomorrow if we don't aim for it today. I do think that there's a case we could push for that today. So one of the things about call walls is that even though dealers want to be pushing underneath it, what they can do is actually just sell the entire way above it because it kind of works in the same way as heading downward. The farther you start pushing upward, upward, upward against some of these ranges, it actually does shake people out. Okay, so there is a case of potentially we just absolutely rocket to the upside to shake out a lot of calls, which I know that sounds silly, but that is something dealers do sometimes. Kind of the same with puts. Um, if they're really wanting to break that level, sometimes you'll see a massive push to the downside well below it because retail didn't expect that type of move. Something sold. Yay, I finally sold that stupid ACN call. And I sold it for profit. I'm happy. Okay, everybody. I hope everyone has a great rest of their trading day. You all know kind of what to look for at this point. Make sure you're watching what's going on with the HIG. Right now it's very, very, very strong. Even if we're seeing it pull down very slightly, it's very strong right now. Volatility was up at the 95.13, currently at the 94.32. So if we continue to see this taper to the downside, that's going to be very, very bullish for the SPY. We see this cup and handle starting to form. From this handle, we can expect a nested handle, which is basically a structure within a structure, so a handle within a handle. And from that, very likely going to lead to a breakout to that 755 plus. But I do want to see semiconductors buying upward. I think that's very, very, very important today. Seeing a small cup here on TSM, so if this does turn to a handle and start pushing to the upside, that would be ideal. But we don't want to see it push down to the 410.41, which it's only 20 cents away from. Because if it does do that, then that's going to invalidate that small cup. And it did. So potentially have to look at this as a head and shoulders now, which would be that handle on that inverse cup. So multiple different signals to look at today. But overall, I think the expectation should be to push above that 755. All right, everybody, have a great day. Have a great rest of your trading day. And I'll be posting the recap / analysis video tonight. And for those joining the class tonight, I'll be doing the class on the moving averages. So hope to see you all either in one of those videos or in tomorrow's stream. But take care, everybody, and talk to you later.